Hello and welcome to season 5 of UX Banter, the season of innovation, your gateway to visionary conversations with design pioneers where creativity meets technology. I'm your host Dushyant Kanungo, and in this season we are exploring what's new, exciting, and challenging in the world of UX. Together, we'll get into the minds of innovators and pioneers, discovering the secrets to building great user experiences. Hello, everyone. This is Dushyant Karungo, your host for the UX Banter podcast. Our guest today is an accomplished senior product designer and full stack developer with over 7 years of expertise in UX and user centered design and development. Recently recognized as 2024's top product designers by UXL, ranking fifth in his specialty and number seven globally, he has crafted impactful digital solutions for innovative startups. A globally recognized mentor, he combines creative design expertise with technical acumen to drive business success. Please welcome the senior product designer at Audius, Jonas Bröms.
Thank you so much.
Hello,
I
hello.
appreciate the high praise.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's nice to be here.
So tell me about it. How does it feel to be recognized as the top authority on in your field that things that you do, and how does it feel to be at the top?
To be honest, I haven't sunk in yet. I've looked at like the certificates and the stuff that they sent me, and it still feels a little bit unreal. But I'm trying to not feed my imposter syndrome by just uh, by just like being proud of it. And yeah, I did this. This is cool. And I think the most important thing is actually I helped a lot of people, and I think that's why I was getting that recognition. And I think that's actually way cooler than the actual achievement, so to speak,
All
or
right.
the yeah.
While we are at it, everybody listening and with your achievements would like to know about the journey and the path that has taken you to this place.
Yeah, I mean, we could start like from a very young age. I followed my mother to a art class, and that was kind of giving me some inspiration into the creativity of yeah, the creative work, so to speak. And then when I was like 7, I got a computer, an Amiga 500 plus.
Mhm,
This was way before Mac or PC was even around, so that's how old I am.
mhm,
The salesperson said that I think I had 500 kilobytes of RAM, and he said I would never be able to. I will never run out of memory. I would have sufficient. So yeah, and then I was started playing games on it, and I was more interested in how create these games. It felt like black magic as a kid, and I wasn't like sure I loved consuming games, but I was more kind of interested of how they were made. So I started doing that and experimenting as a kid on this computer, and then yeah, a couple of years later, I had a cousin, and he was working for the computer game company Dice, the creator of like Battlefield and really
mhm.
big blockbuster cool games or whatever you call them. But back then, it was just like a very, very small, tiny indie computer game company. And he took me to his office, and it was like a Frankenstein's laboratory with yeah concept art on the walls, plastered computer games, open computers. I mean, with like graphics cards stacked to the ceiling. It was just like a crazy place. And music instruments. It was just like really cool and very inspiring for a small kid like myself growing up in a blue collar city like Gothenburg in Sweden. Yeah, he really trajected me towards like creating stuff, doing that stuff instead of like maybe going into one of the industries of Gothenburg. So I kind of been chasing that dragon ever since, I would say.
Perfect. So those are the childhood influences. But what about the company?
Yes. The I don't know, like last year was one of the hardest year for me. It was like I really we have an expression in Sweden like steel bath.
Mhm,
And it's not a nice bath to have. So I went through a lot. Like I lost an investment, a huge investment. I had a divorce. I lost two big contracts. I couldn't get anything back because of the market has been really rough this year. So yeah, it was just like, I don't know. It was a really rough year. And I had a friend. He's not with us anymore, but he became a very well-known figure here in Sweden, a public speaker and a podcaster, and he's also like a, what do you call it, like a bestseller author globally. And he was he was a guy who was become one of the youngest CFOs, I think, of one of the biggest industrial companies we have here in Sweden. But he quit that and became a Buddhist monk instead for 17 years. And then he came back to Sweden, and a lot of people came up to him with their problems, especially people that were kind of like a similar situation like myself, because they saw him as a wise man, right? And they all asked him, they conveyed their problems to him, and he usually listened. And then after a while, he usually told them like, "Why don't you do something for somebody else?" And this was usually very triggering for people to hear. And then they usually answered like, "But I'm having all the problems." And he usually, yeah, yeah, I hear you, but do something for somebody else and see how that makes you feel. So when all this stuff kind of happened to me, I kind of had his voice in the back of my mind, and I just felt like, let me see what I can do for somebody else, because apparently I can't really focus on myself right now. So I started like I was just like going out finding mentorship sites, and then I just started like pushing and see what I could do for other people. And it's been a hell of a journey, I would say. I've done this year, I've done 250, 240 mentorships sessions. And the people I've met, incredible, so inspiring, so they're so motivated, so smart. And they challenge me. Like it's really hard to be in my own perception because like I have to question not just what they are doing, but I have to question why am I doing this? So it's been a really great way to get perspective on myself, my work, and yeah, and also
I
be
think
influenced by other people. Yeah.
it's a great exercise in retrospect whenever you are mentoring on a platform. I think ADP List has been successful in doing so over the years. Even when I asked the founder of ADP List, Felix Lee, that that was early days before he got the funding and all. I said I'm going to start a podcast that I want to, but I'm not sure that if people will come to talk to me. And Felix graciously said, why don't you have me on as a guest up front, and then we'll see from there. And so Felix was my first guest on this podcast.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw
uh,
that.
yeah, that is the first episode. And I didn't know how to do podcasting. We did like a couple of trial runs internally to figure out the technicalities of how does it go. And now I watch it and cringe because I think I lost great opportunity to have him and not go as deep as it should be. I think I should get back to him and say, let's do another episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, so see the generosity part. I think that's what he did to me, and I completely understand. And even as a mentor, I completely agree with you that we get to explore the areas of our own field and knowledge that we haven't thought about before. And it's rewarding in its own space. It cannot be quantified to say the least, but it definitely worth giving back.
Yeah, and also like I know like something that I've read a lot is that like imposter syndrome is all-time high now right now with people, there's so much innovation going on that we all struggle somehow, and I've been struggling with imposter syndrome as well. Not as much nowadays, but definitely, I mean, 5 years ago it was really terrible. And I don't know, like to see people that comes from like huge companies that have like some of the people I've mentored have been like so much more accomplished than me in terms of like just looking at their CV, so to speak. PhDs, masters, because I don't have like an academic background like some of these people, but I've been able to help them either way. And it's been a beautiful kind of like collaboration and kind of transfer of knowledge and experiences, which I find like it's so hard to do it We should do it in a corporate situation, but there are rarely time for it, which I find it's kind of counterintuitive why we kind of look at it like that, but it seems that everybody's kind of dealing with it. So yeah, and some of these people have so much more accomplished, and still they are also dealing with imposter syndrome, which I find baffling.
A common themes that is addressed in UX profession, isn't it? Because sometimes the bigger struggle was finding seat at the table, and I think it's sown the seeds of the importance of things that we're doing. So either we blindly pushing it, or those doubts actually keep us away from, getting away, the next step of the bench. And then you have people who are, say, doing engineering from design point of view, that I can definitely say that there is always has been this sort of disparity in terms of that how much money we are getting paid versus the engineering. And then that has led to the point where the complexes about superiority and inferiority, it just keeps seeping in. And sometimes it has an impact when it is, in a very, very long run, when you keep doing it, then there comes a point, either you float or you sink. There is no other way about it.
Yeah. And I mean, you can take a look at like Dunning-Kruger effect. You can do all of that stuff. But I usually share with people who have imposter syndrome. I usually share like a quote from Charles Bukowski. The problem with the world is that the intelligent people are full of doubts, while the stupid ones are full of confidence, which is kind of like a funny way of, I don't know, taking a look at.
It's true. It is true. I mean, products are built based on the solution. And then
Yeah.
oh man, why people are not using it? It works beautifully. It works, but it's not quite something that people want to use. And what do people want to use? How do we know? Because we already decided that the product works this way. We never asked anybody that how this is going to work out. So while you have this fascinating journey of traveling across Sweden to UAE and Cyprus and other places in the world, do you think that that has impacted you as an individual, as a professional?
Oh, yes. My entire life was kind of falling into darkness last year. I had a friend who said if we all tried to move from our own perception and to try and to attain perspective, the world would be such a more beautiful place to live in. And I, like I don't know how weird we Swedes were until I moved away from Sweden because I couldn't. When you live here, this is normal. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the perception. That's like, from a satellite perspective, like this is
Well,
normal. How we act, how we deal, what we say, this is all normal, right? But like I have a story when I was working for an agency in Dubai, and they took me in on a crisis meeting and they said, Jonas, you're very rude. And I'm like, what? Okay, let's explore this. What do you mean? And then I realized quite quickly that in Sweden, we have communication, a way of dealing with communication where it needs to be effective. And we're very to the point, I would say. I think British people or English people would probably say that we're very, very to the point, almost as much as a German,
you
as the
don't beat
Germans.
around the bush. You're direct. And I think
Yes.
that's the reason why I'm friends with so many Swedish people, because I tend to do that as well. And the feedback that I get from British people, that you are so direct, it makes us uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
yeah, so nice, consolidation of understanding of how I see Swedes as well. All right. And
I
then
mean, it- yeah, it's and I find it so interesting when it comes to like because they basically took up the email part. Like if I sent an email to my colleague, it would basically be like if you were my colleague, I would be like, hey, Dushan, could you just do this? No, please, no, nothing. Just like what I need from you. Do you know what I mean? But in a British or English context, what they want to what they want to receive from me is basically, hi, Dushan. How lovely it was to meet you yesterday. It's always so insightful to the conversations that we have, blah, 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 you know. And then at the end, at the bottom, it's like, I would really appreciate if you could maybe perhaps take a look at this, you know. It's
Oh,
kind
sorry
of like,
for the not a fast.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And from a Swedish standpoint, like, I am wasting your time with all of this, like, fluff or whatever we would call it in Sweden, you know. But like again, I didn't know that. I didn't know that we were very effective. Just this is a perfect example. Swedes, if we go to the grocery store, we would turn the barcode of the products that we put on the conveyor belt towards the laser, so it's a
Yeah,
smoother ride for everybody. They even have it like on signs and stuff when you go to the grocery store. This is how efficient we are. We don't want to waste time. We don't want to waste your time, and I don't want to waste my time.
IKEA is the best testament of the way Swedes' minds work. And I almost got into a fist fight with a Brit about this because we were doing a college group project. And so I had to show this guy something. And I just said, hey, come. And with the I took the name and said, come. And this guy got really angry, got up to me and said, you're not the boss of me. So, what did I say? I just asked you to come over here. I said, you didn't, do you realize that you are so bossy? And then my friend said that you must say either, hey, listen, can I borrow you for a minute? Or do you have a second? Would you mind joining us here and have a look? Said, why would I say so many words when I can just say, hey, come? And that should be it. And he knows that we are working on a group project together, and I'm working and he's just playing a game on his phone. So
But is this something that you've been influenced by Sweden when you were there, or is this something that you would say in India?
I mean, I
Like,
naturally I was like that before. I mean, that is one of the things that doesn't make me fit anywhere in the world. But then I realized that you have to use the polite language to get your messages conveyed in the right way. I mean, English is again the second language for me as is for you. And
yep.
when we are dealing there, we don't sometimes miss those things. But India, because there are so many people, we don't have time to say sorry, thank you, or please. You ask somebody something on the road, where is this place? The guy will tell you go to the right, and you don't even say thank you. And there was no please in between, and it's duty of the guy who would just say, yeah, go to the right, and he'll walk away. He is not expecting a courtesy thank you from you. And that's
Yeah,
that
it's an interesting way, but you can't. I don't think you can learn these types of things and these subtle changes, because I mean, even I've been to Norway, even though it's a neighboring country to Sweden, we're very different culturally. Like, and maybe if you don't live here, you might not see it. But me as a Swede, like a Norwegian person is almost like an alien. Like they behave totally different than we Swedes do,
I've seen
in
them
all sorts
together,
of
so I
ways.
can tell you. I have seen them together.
Yeah, I mean, even the language is very very similar. Like I could probably speak. It's at least from the people that live in the southern parts of Norway. I could probably speak Swedish, and they could speak Norwegian, and we would understand each other. But still, culturally, we're very very different. So it's very interesting, and I didn't really understand culture, what that was. But now, like when it comes to working these days, I say that I'm not in tech. I'm not in startup business. I'm in the business of communication, because usually that's where everything breaks down when in tech. Because I don't know, we say so much, but we say so little somehow. I don't know why. And we have long meetings where like there's no really, we don't get to the point. We're not telling the intention of the meeting. We're not having like a whole, I don't know. There's like a whole thing about effective meeting, which I think is something that everybody in tech could definitely use more. You set your intention, why you have the meeting, what decisions are you supposed to make, and what result are you trying to achieve by setting these, or doing the If you have those before you even send out an invitation to a meeting, I think most meetings would be 5 to 10 minutes, and they would be so much more effective than just like, here we have an agenda, here are all the bullet points, here are all the like let's discuss. And I'm like, no, no, no. Let's not discuss. Let's make a decision and let's see what this could, and let's iterate from that. Let's see what we get for the result.
As they say, 80% of meetings could be just an email, and
Yeah,
that would be, if the thread goes long, then you can say, yeah, let's meet now because it is getting out of control. So while working in UAE, I think culturally that's a phenomena which is beyond anything in the world.
yeah,
You working in UAE and now you are dealing with like 200 nationalities every day. Like literally every single person, well, the 10% are the local people, but every other person that you're going to meet, almost 90% of the people you're dealing with is not from UAE. And the cultural
yeah.
shifts, the perception, the language models, the way they talk requirement and they see the business is completely different. So any thoughts on how you manage that crisis?
I think immediately when I moved to the UAE, I understood that I've been fed a lot of like information and it wasn't misinformation, it was like from news, from everything, right? And it wasn't really misinformation, but because I didn't understand what was happening on the ground, so to speak, it was hard for me to actually, I don't know, take in the information and actually understand what was happening. And like you said, when you meet all the like, I think 80% of all the people in UAE, they are, yeah, not locals. They're expats, immigrants. And I think just asking questions, short questions. I think when you're doing coaching conversations, I think that's called orientation. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what it's called. And it's basically like you can kind of go in different directions. It could be like, can you be more specific? Can you explain it to me from a more general perspective? And if they like, maybe they explain, and then you could be like, so what's that a part? What's that a part of? And what you're trying to do when you're asking these types of questions is trying to understand like their metaphorical landscape, so to speak. So we can now start to communicate and have some sort of a shared understanding of what's going on. But that's, I mean, if you're in traffic in the UAE or in any like more high stressed situation, that might be tougher to deal with. But in a corporate situation, when you have meetings and stuff like that, that's easier. So just like trying to get one more question in on why the person took this, why they wanted to talk about it, what they're dealing with, whatever. So try to understand what they actually mean and why this is important. Because then that facilitates some sort of a good, better decision making environment for you and the person at hand, I think.
Really good advice. I mean, it can be summarized as one more question. I mean, it's not going to hurt.
Yeah.
Even everything cleared up, you did the summarization, but asking another question is not going to hurt. Most probably, the person may feel you're stupid, but at least he would understand that he has communicated everything clearly. And that, I think, is the key when you're dealing with multiple. Well, isn't that also applied to the cross domain and multi-dimensional teams where you have cross-functional teams, leaders, managers coming in from their different worlds, and then you have to make sure that they understand. So over communication, there is no such thing as over communication. So you just have to make sure that it is perfectly explained and understood. Wow.
Yeah,
And
and be a little bit uncomfortable, like be comfortable in the uncomfortable. So like asking a question that you might think is like, ooh, this is maybe I don't want to ask it, but I need the answer. Then you probably should ask it. And when you do that on a scale, you also learn, you go to a deeper level of knowledge of understanding the situation and the person that you're working with. So then you can kind of start like next time if you get that type of feedback because you asked a good question, and maybe you got an answer that kind of pushed you in the right direction, then if you do that on scale, you will move to a much deeper and place with that person and with the work quicker. So it's also like a scale. It's a time-based thing as well, like that happens over time, so to speak. If you ask one more question in each meeting that is relevant to the thing that you're doing, then you will, maybe you didn't get the great answer today, but based on the answer they said 5 days ago, 2 days ago, the accumulation of all that stuff, you can now kind of start to see a direction, I think, without even like asking the next question. If you get that kind of relationship.
The more the
Maybe
conversation.
maybe maybe that's a little bit weird explained, but
It's
yeah.
not. It makes sense that you have to dig deeper and you have to make sure that you remember what was discussed the last time. And if the
Yeah.
person is themselves, you can ask like why the last time was this answer and now why you're telling something which is different. It could be the different context that you understood for, and it is completely different context that right now the conversation is taking place. So to our listeners, whoever has joined in, if you want to talk to Jonas one-on-one, he's doing mentoring on ADP list. He also can be approached over LinkedIn as his profile link and ADP list URL is in the description. So you guys can always reach out to him. And on that note, I must say I forgot the rapid fire round, which I'm not going to do that now. But I would ask the advice that Eunice, that you can enlighten us with, that anybody who is following your footsteps, who wants to follow your footsteps and wants to be in a career where you are, what advice would that be?
Oh, what a great question. Oh my God, you knocked me out with that one.
No rush, take your time. Can I rephrase it for you to think? So it's like if when you were young,
Say
what
yes, yes. Say it again. Say it again. Like this was. Oh my God, this was one of the best questions I've ever had. I think I'm stunned.
okay, so there are two
Yep.
questions. We'll pick
Yep.
whichever. So first
Yep.
is, what advice would you give to your younger self if you meet them today's environment? That what to do to get to where you are, and what advice would you give to young people who want to follow in on your footsteps?
What I would say to my younger self would basically be, don't be afraid of what everybody else is doing. Be inspired by it instead. Be happy that they were able to create it, and look at what can you use from that in your own journey and your own creations or whatever you're doing. Uh, like, be inspired by it. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be mad at it or angry at it. You know, yeah, angry that they made it, not you. And to follow me in my footsteps. I think the new landscape that is kind of unfolding in front of our eyes. I don't know if you should follow me in my footsteps. I think the new landscape is up for grabs, and I feel very like I don't really know. During these mentorship sessions, I've had like the question, this is basically the question most of the younger juniors ones are asking. And I've had a hard time answering that question because coding, designing, like it's all coming together. Should I learn code? There's a lot of these
Hmm.
juniors are asking, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, and also like, let's say we get all these like, I've heard like, okay, AI and LLMs was the big thing to 2024, 2025, AI agents are the big thing, right? And I'm thinking like, because everybody is now creating designs and all this stuff and flows for sitting in front of a computer, sitting in front of a, I don't know, whatever, a device that we are kind of scrolling or doing things. But with the level of technical evolution that is happening, like I will most likely not interact with technology the way that we have been doing. We will most likely do it through like, I don't know, like a chip or glasses, augmented reality, like something, we will have something else. So we will most likely not interact with tech in the way that we have been doing. But like I can't like I wouldn't say dumbfounded, but I'm trying to figure out this myself. Like, how are we supposed, like, why should I sit in front of a computer if I could talk to a computer or talk to a device and have that device make something for me? Whilst I don't know, maybe because I have a lot of creative ideas when I'm out walking, in the forest, or, in nature. What if I could create something, like I was listening to something and I would be like, pause, I would just take up my, I don't know, AI companion or co-pilot, and I would be like, okay, so what I can see is this and this and this, and I would explain it to the AI, and then it would kind of start to create it, and I would be like, no, that's not really what I meant, and then I would create with it, talk to it, and create something that I would see.
So
But hey,
it's to be very challenging for anybody who is coming up. And I think the way AI and the interactions with the device where there is no screens are going to be, or if the screens are on the augmented side, or the screens and everything is
yes,
through your voice interfaces. So being ready or getting set for the future is very difficult and different from where dinosaurs like us do stand, because we did technology very differently, and now
yes.
the interactions are coming. So everybody has to be ready. Tech is going to come and go, and we have to be accepting of it and making sure that we learn it as soon as it comes and keep updating ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm already using, like I'm testing ChatGPT on so many like levels. Like the other day I told it to be my like psychiatrist. And I'm like was asking, because you can talk to it, right? So I was
Mhm.
asking it a lot, and like, so, and what are you like, so I was kind of like asking questions towards the AI when I it gave me advice, and then I was like, so what are you basing this on, and it was very interesting to kind of how that conversation was being made, and I wasn't really like, uncomfortable having the conversation. And it felt, after a while, it kind of felt like I was talking to a human. I kind of had to remind myself that this is not a human. This is just an AI synthesized voice based on generative AI. Do you know what I mean? So, and I think this, I mean, just think about like when I started in tech, you had to load a computer game. It took you like, I don't know, 2 to 5 minutes to load it. You
Yes,
had to like use a cassette, a cassette
rewind.
that you put in. And nowadays you can just like open your phone and you have this like beautiful tools and all this stuff. So the creation part of how to create stuff is going to be so different than how I kind of created stuff. And I think I should probably ask the people who are much younger than me, how are you going to create stuff? Do you know what I mean? Because I do feel like a dinosaur sometimes. Like I'm creating views in Figma, and I'm like doing what we're always been doing basically. But that is going to change for sure. I don't see, like, my mom, if they could have, like my mom and dad, if they could interact with whatever, and they could create or get anything like value, they don't want to use the phone because it takes them forever, and they forget the password, they forget like all these things, so they don't use it. But if they could talk to something or do something in that's more natural to them, of course they're going to use it. That makes so much more sense than to be on a screen and press, and they don't see it, and all these things and all the steps, and yeah.
The new
So
world. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful piece of advice, and it was a great talking to you in this podcast, Jonas. I would must say that there are insights in this conversation that people have to understand and take them with in the long term, short term. And I don't think that these conversations were just for the young people who are just joining in the industry or starting off, but a lot of professionals can get insights into how things are. So, with that, I thank you once again for joining our
you,
podcast.
thank you. It was a pleasure. This was so much fun.
It was, and with With that, I would conclude this episode. Thank you, everybody, for joining in to listen to this podcast and conversation. I will see you next week with another guest and another new banter on UX and the people behind it. Till then, have a good day and a wonderful night.